Many times we're not always just fishing for trout, or at least for small trout. Many times in a situation like this in a lake or a stream, or say you're lucky enough to go after a steelhead, whether it's the West Coast or around the Lake Michigan area, you need a line that's going to go down deep. And if anybody out there has ever cast a full sinking line, you'll know how tough it is to cast. A few years back, a good friend of mine by the name of Jim Teeney came up with a line system that has really kind of changed fishing as we know it right now. What he did was attach a very heavy sinking line to a floating line. And he usually made them anywhere from 10 to 25 feet. And when they first came out, it really changed everything, because before we had what we called shooting head lines, where the lines were heavy and they were attached to some running line, which could be braided Dacron or even nylon. And when you cast them, they were really something, because if you cast them, they would get tangled. We call this essentially a shooting head. And what that is it's a heavy line, very heavy, and what it'll do is it'll shoot out and it will pull the other line with it. It takes a certain casting technique that really makes this line very easy to cast. In fact, even people who just are beginning casters, if they learn how to cast this line right, can cast it very easily. There's 25-foot heads and there's 10-foot heads. They call those mini heads. Now the head is the sinking part of the line, and this is what we call running line. Now Jim made to attach it to a floating line, which made it easier to deal with. But over the years, they've made this and then perfected them with different types of cores, so they shoot even better than when Jim first came out with the line. But let's talk about how you cast them. The first thing you want to know on a sinking line is you're not going to have a long leader. I usually use 2 sections of leader. This happens to be about 15 pound. This is down to my tippet size at about 8 pound. Essentially the leader is about 3.5 feet long. Nothing more than 4 feet. You want the leader and the line to be pretty close to each other. When picking the rod size, it's going to determine on what type of fish you're going after. If you're going to fish for steelhead, it's going to be a 7 and 8 weight. If you're going out in the ocean, it could be anywhere from a 9 to even a 12 weight. So we're going to get started here with the first steps on using this line. And of course, the cast is what it's all about. First thing about casting this line, it ought to have a slash, no false casting. Because if you cast this in a normal false cast, you're going to be wearing this line all around you, and you're going to have one of these big flies right in the back of your neck. First of all, look how this is coming by me. Oh my God, it's got my name written all over it. So what we've got to do is not false cast it. We're going to shoot it. We're going to fire it straight out with only one back cast. And that's probably the hardest thing for a more experienced caster to get used to, because everybody wants to false cast some and then shoot it. Carry the line. The big key is to not let that line get out of your rod, that sinking line. So let's take a look at it here. Here we go. First of all, because these are different colored, it's easy for you to see that. And what I'm going to do is pull in about 1.5 feet of line into the guide. And one of the things you got to learn with this is to learn to do a roll cast. And the first time you try it, don't put a fly on it. Just practice your roll cast like this, just going back and forth, making the roll cast so it hits the water just like this. See how I'm hitting the water with the roll cast? The line's in, nothing's happening. Now that's the first step. You learn to do that until you really got it down. And then what I'd like you to do is that after this, when this roll cast first hits the water, bring it straight back and let it slide through your fingers. What that does is the line will just, the heavy part of that shooting head will pull the line out on the grass behind you. And this is a good place. We're in a park here. It's a great place to practice this. But at first, practice it without a heavy fly on it. Notice how it pulled the line out, and I made a pretty good cast on the grass behind me. Now that's the first step. So we're going to do that first. Now let's go ahead and strip our line back in. And again, what are we going to do? We're going to pull that in the rod again. We're going to start over. Let's practice it. Here we go again. It's going to hit the water, come back, let it go. And you can see the momentum that line is going. It's pulling it out and you're ready to roll. Now Once you do that enough times and you feel pretty confident, now we're ready to make the first shoot. And we're not going to put out too much line at the first cast. Okay, we're going to bring the line in for the next step of learning how to do this. Again, the 1.5 feet, we're going to roll cast it up. Now, let me just stop here for a second. Watch how my rod is going up here. I'm getting a little bit more leverage, then I'm pushing it forward, and the minute it hits the water, then you want to pull it back. Now, as you get better at it, you won't let it hit the water, but at first, it's best to let it hit the water. Okay, here we go. Hit the water, back, stop, forward, let go. That's all you want to do for that first step of that cast, is to bring it back, let it just straighten out a little bit, then let it forward and just let go of the line. And now if it comes crashing back and hits your rod, that's because you didn't let it straighten out. You came forward too soon. So let's go ahead and try that one more time, and then we're going to start into the more advanced parts of this cast. If you can imagine, if you're sitting out on a boat, or if you're on a big river, you may want to have a basket to hold this running line, as we call it here. We call that a stripping basket, especially if you're wading deep. But here, this is a good place to manage the line. As you can see, it's real easy to step on this line. Okay, so we're going to try that one more time. And we're going to, again, make sure it's in the rod. We're going to roll cast as it hits, come back, stop, come forward, and let it go. Just let it go. Notice that my hand is right down here. Just let it go. Okay, we're going to strip it in. Now we're going to go ahead into the next part of the cast. We're going to strip out a little bit more line, and we're going to show you how far you can go. Now, what I would say right now, a pretty good fishing cast with one of these is about 60, 70 feet. I mean, I'll bet you haven't made a 60 or 70 foot cast without a false cast in your life. Well, here you go. You can do it with this line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back. I'm going to come to a stop. I'm not going way back here. If you go way back here, you're going to end up throwing that line right straight onto the ground. So we're going to stop here. As I come forward, I'm going to end up pushing hard right there and really stopping. Where a lot of our other casts, we follow through. Here we keep the line high. Now, why is that? Because there's so much weight on this line and on the fly. You know what we're really doing? I bet some of you are thinking about it. We're really doing kind of a spin cast. That's really about what we're doing. We're letting this weight pull it out just like a spinning lure. All right, so let's watch what happens now. Again, I've got my line stripped out. I've got about 60 feet. And okay, we're going to get ready. Here we go. We make our cast, hits the water back. As it's forward, we let it go, and look at that. We threw all the line. Now, what I did is I really added the energy right here. I really punched it. Can the double haul or a single haul, or what I like to use a term, a jerk or a pull, help you with this? Yes, it can. And that's what we're going to show you a little bit more advanced. If you're going to get outside of the U.S. and go for some bigger fish and you have to get deep, you're going to have to learn how to cast one of these lines. So pay attention, and we're going to go into the next steps. We're going to add a little something to this. We're going to strip out a little bit more line. And there's two steps that we can do to make this cast a little better. One is, of course, a little pull on the front cast. So I'm going to do step number one. Again, we're not going to hit the water now. What we're going to do is roll cast, come back, and I'm going to pull down. Now notice I pulled down on that. When I pulled down on that, that shot it out. And that last cast, it hit a little in front of me. And that's because where I was aiming. You got to aim a little higher. So let's reconstruct that cast again. We roll it out. This time I'm not hitting, I'm coming forward. Look where I'm stopping. I'm stopping up higher, and that's causing that line to shoot a little higher. The more that you cast this, the more you know it's a coordination. Now let me just emphasize that for a second. Okay, we're going to roll it out, and as it comes back here, right here, notice I just emphasized that. I really punched it. It's just like the same kind of a stroke, literally you throw a spinning lure at. But now I'm going to add the final thing to let it really sail on you. And that's a little pull at the right time. Here we go. This can be a lot of fun to cast. But think about it. If you're only going to make one cast, go back As we come forward, now watch my hand here. We're going to do it again, right? We're going to come forward, roll, come back. Now watch, I pulled on that and stretched my hand out. So I pulled, I punched. I just pulled at the same time. So now we're ready for the third and final way of increasing your distance. And we're going to actually let some line out on our back casts. Kind of a little bit of danger to it. And I usually tell people it's about this much. It doesn't mean letting out 30 feet of line in your back cast. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to combine letting line on the back cast and then pulling on the forward cast. And to do that, I will actually come to even more of a complete stop. We're going to bring the rod up. It's in the guides. We're going to roll it out. As we come back, we let some line go out and we pull it forward, and there it goes. You know, this is an easy way of covering a lot of territory. Most of the time, a 100-foot cast isn't going to increase your chances. But when you're in a lake, and you think about a trout lake, or whether you're going for walleye or bass or some of the other warm water species, this is a great way to get out. Now, we're talking about sinking lines here, getting down deep. But guess what? They even make floating lines in shooting heads for distance casting against the wind. These shooting heads are wonderful. You just got to learn how to cast them, and I want you to keep this in mind. One back cast. One back cast. Occasionally, now I'm just going to leave the final thought here. Once you get really good at this and you need a little bit more speed, you can, especially on the intermediate lines that are much, much stiffer. You can do this, and I'll just go ahead and show it to you to end our little casting session. Well, I'm going to roll it back. I'm going to come forward once, come back, and launch it. Same kind of a deal, but I didn't let the line get out of. I didn't let any out on my back cast until my second cast. No more ever than 2. You're going to have a great time hooking a bigger fish. The rewards are going to be great, whether it's a steelhead out in Oregon or Washington or a big salmon from the Great Lakes. Any big fish, and you're going to be glad that you learned how to cast a shooting head.